halfway through the year already. Time is just flying. So just quick logistics as normal. Just make sure you're keeping yourself on mute to just minimize on the amount of background noise. The session is being recorded as well, and we upload these to our YouTube channel. So if you miss out on something, you can always go back and check that out. Now, the agenda for today, we're going to go through welcoming in the news. There's a couple of really exciting things coming out. The announcements at Bold was great. Got some great content to share inside there. Then we've got Kurika, who's going to show us some more things around AI Boulder. We've then got the community discussion, tech tip, and then open floor at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the news. We can use the offices. Yes, Mike, there was some people actually meeting there tonight as well. I know Karika said she was going through tonight for one of the functions. So it's starting to get better, and yes, have some swag and some giveaways. We've also got some stuff from the NTC where you can also donate to that. So that's a great way to get people in person. Okay, so as I mentioned, it was Bold about a couple of weeks back. Great source of information is the Bold Book of News. So this really summarizes all the announcements that happen inside there. There is a section specifically for Power Platform with some of the announcements that we are going through today as well. So if you haven't checked it out, go in there and you can go into each section and see what was announced, as well as all the sessions associated with it. It makes it a lot easier to view and get access to that information, because there was a lot of sessions. A lot of great content also. Now, some of the general availability that's coming out, Canvas components and component libraries are finally generally available. So we've been using this for quite a while at the moment, and now it's finally GA, which is awesome to see. We've also got support for application lifecycle management in these, which is really great to see. So we can really start building these into our DevOps pipelines and really starting to integrate them into what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We've also gone generally available for the modern app designer as well. So with Canvas-based apps, a couple months ago, we released the modern app designer, and it really makes it so quick to build out model-driven apps. I've done the demonstration for customers a couple of times, and they're always blown away by how quickly you can put something together using the new app designer. It's a lot more easier to use, I find, than the previous one. Everything flows nicely, so it's really cool to see that this is now available for everyone and is generally available. Okay. Now, just some of the announcements that happened at Bold. We now have the 5th member of the Power Platform family, and that is Power Pages. This is more of an evolution around Power Portals, which really sat within Power Apps. Now it's breaking out and becoming its own thing, and this is now what we call Power Pages. There are a lot more features in that we're bringing into this, which is great. We've also got the latest announcement with building apps from images or Fluid UI. You should start seeing these in your tenant already. And this is where I just quickly wanted to do a quick demo to show how awesome this really works. And then Mike's also got a demo lined up for us just now as well. Okay, so let me just get the right page. So inside here, you can see, where's that picture that I did just now? I just mocked up something in Whiteboard quickly, so a visitor app. I actually hosted an event earlier on in the week for a bunch of tech journalists talking about Power Apps and how easy it is to create apps. And we actually got up to the whiteboard and we designed something like this on the whiteboard. So a visitor request app, a person would just need to fill in their name, who their host is, the department they're visiting, the date, the reason, and then they can submit this off. So when we showed them this and how easy it was to do, they were absolutely blown away. You can see when you go in, it just gives you some things that you should look out for, how you should be building these forms, making sure it's not too complex or multiple pages at this stage. There is a way to do multiple pages where you're bringing in, creating additional apps for each one. It's not ideal at the moment. Hopefully they come out with something better and also give us the ability to do complex forms as well. That will be really nice to see. But you see, I go next. I can give it a name. Visitor registration. I can upload my own file here. Let's go to that one. There we go. You can see I can choose the format here if I want. I can go next. And now what it's doing is it's using that AI engine to go and identify key components of the app. And it does a really good job of it. You can see I've got my labels here. It's already marked them out. It's also marked up all of my text inputs. You can see it's even picked up that this was a drop-down box as well. But this one, we want it to be a date picker, so I can very easily go in, change this, come into a date picker, and that one we're going to leave as a text input as well. So once you've done this, we can move on, and this is the really great thing. You can see, go and create my new table in Dataverse for me. So you don't even need to worry about going and creating that data source or that table that you're going to work with. The engine is going to do it all in the back end for you. We go next, we can see the columns. We can just make sure that the spelling is correct on all of them and the data type. We go next, we can see the details, and we can go and edit and change it if we want to, but this is fine for now. And let me go and create. So everything it's doing now, it's going and creating that data source for us that we will use. It's essentially just creating a new table within Dataverse, creating all those fields that we will use, and then it's going to generate the app for me. And this is really off the back of a previous discussion we had where do you mock it up or muck it up? And we were talking around what you do, how you go and start building out your apps. And a lot of people talked about designing them in Visio, designing them in PowerPoint, and then bringing that design into Power Apps. Now that process is a heck of a lot simpler to do. It's a lot more straightforward, it's a lot easier, and there's multiple different formats that it does support. Like I said earlier on in the week, we were actually using the Surface Hub and we were drawing the app and designing the app on there and importing it. It was a really great experience. This usually just takes a couple of minutes and then we've got the app up and running. And then I'll show you some of the things that it's able to pick up directly from there.
This is going to make the app in a day session a lot shorter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you combine this with the model-driven app that usually goes with app in a day, it really makes the whole thing into less than an hour or two to get it done.
You can crunch this into 17 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's check here.
Just imagine how much money Elon Musk can save if he just takes a picture of Twitter and gives it to Power Apps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go build me that.
Okay, so you can see here, I've got my app working. I've got my label at the top. I can go and recustomize this. But the one thing that really blew my mind, my submit button is already populated with the expression. I didn't have to do anything inside there. And then we can come in, we can go in and adjust the drop-down controls, the drop-down label. Default date is already defaulting to today. So all these really cool things, it's up and running and working. And you saw that in less than 5 minutes. You probably spend more time drawing and designing the app than actually creating it at the end of the day. So I just thought that was really awesome. And I wanted to just show everyone what that looked like. Okay. The other big announcement was the evolution of Power Virtual Agent. So there's a lot more new features coming in here. Support for adaptive cards, which is great. I know we've been waiting for this for a while, but also bringing in images and videos, quick replies, as well as dynamic responses in there. And Mike, you said you wanted to do a quick demo on this just to show them what that new interface looks like.
I can certainly do that.
Awesome.
Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Okay, let's do this. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, cool. But you don't need to. I'm just talking. Okay, no, so I guess in a future session, maybe we can go into a lot more detail. But I don't know, was it about a year ago I did a session on Power Virtual Agents and then like taking them to the next level with Composer, and then taking them to the next level with writing code using the bot framework. And so essentially up until this point, you know, you would use Power Virtual Agent as your no-code way of building out a bot. And then if you needed more advanced stuff, then you would switch to use the bot framework Composer. And if you needed even more advanced stuff, then you would write code. And they kind of work together. So like Power Virtual Agent can call a bot or a skill that you've built in code, and vice versa. And that's all good. But the problem is like there's almost three technologies there that pretty much could accomplish the same thing with varying degrees of skills and effort. And so what's happened now, it's kind of like, you know, like some people say, and I heard Jonathan say this the other day, you know, what is Power Apps? It's when PowerPoint and Excel got together late one night, had a few drinks, and then there was this baby. It's kind of like if Composer and Power Virtual Agent and the bot framework got together one night, and don't know how it would quite work, but anyway, the child would be this new user experience that you see in front of you here, or this new designer. So there's now one designer that you use to build your conversational bots. So conversational bots, this is the designer. And it's got a load of the capabilities from Composer and even some stuff that wasn't in Composer. And it's quite cool because you can use it as a non-technical person, but you can then also kind of switch to code and write code. So you can use it as a super technical person as well. And these two people persons can work together on it at the same time. So I've just got a little click-through demo here. I'm not too good on click-through demos, but this will give you some sense. So what this is here is essentially it's a bot that allows me to return a product that I bought from the store. And the first thing it asks for is, why are you returning it? And then based on the why I'm returning, it's going to ask me, well, who are you? So you have to verify that you are who you say you are. So it's going to verify me. It's going to send me a code. Then I validate that code. Then it checks my recent purchases in the database. And it displays a list of the recent purchases to the customer. And so, like as an example, this UI is quite different to what you're used to if you've built out responses or asking questions. So this here is asking a question, but what it's actually doing is within this designer, I can choose adaptive cards, or I'll call it interesting user interfaces to give back to the user instead of them just having a text-based conversation. So you'll see here, you know, there's various different options I've got straight inside of Power Virtual Agent now. So inside of Power Virtual Agent, I can literally add an adaptive card or an image or a message variation. So, you know, instead of saying good day, you know, you can say message variation is good day, hi, how's it going? Or, you know, 4 different variations. So every time you speak to the bot, you get a different variation. So it doesn't seem like you're speaking to a bot. So yeah, and what's interesting with adaptive cards is you can just go and paste in adaptive card JSON that you get from adaptivecards.io. So this is an example of just kind of like popping in code. What's also very cool is the integrated speech. So one of the things I've actually been doing quite recently is I've assembled an IVR using Power Virtual Agent. So you phone in and it says, you know, press 1 for sales or 2 for customer service. And it turns out, like, you suddenly start realizing, like, you need something different for speech than text. You know, one example is if you ask someone through IVR, through a bot physically speaking to someone, and the bot says, what's your reference number? Now, once you can put in on your keypad, 79234, or you can literally just say 79234. But what's interesting, if that's a text conversation, it knows you've got to the end of your numbers because you hit enter, right? So if you're having a chat, you hit enter, you post your message. But when you're doing voice, how does it know you've finished saying your number? So it's stuff like this that becomes quite interesting that this will understand, which is like DTMF, press a hash or a certain number of characters. Also, when the bot talks to the person, the human speaking to the bot, what tone should it use? Where should it pause? Should it just read text, or should it play a video file? So these are different things that you can go and do and have different responses for text and speech. And certainly in an example like this, it would have to read off my recent responses and my recent purchases, because an adaptive card won't work. An adaptive card will work in a user interface. So it's pretty cool. And now if it's voice, I can go and tell it to pause on certain words or emphasize certain words, etc. So this is, you'll see the UI designer is very similar, but just a whole bunch added. Another one that you'll start seeing coming in is PowerFX. So the same function expression language that you have in Power Apps and Power Automate is now also in Power Virtual Agent. So if I want to start doing like if type statements directly in logic here, if it's the morning, say good morning. If it's the afternoon, say good afternoon. And date functions, trims and uppers and lowers and all these cool things. So so that's pretty cool as well. And now it's just going to do a quick test of the bot to show you it working. What's nice is on the right-hand side, you also see all variables and their values, which you didn't see before. It was quite hard to get access to variables. So to debug it, this is pretty cool. Another thing you couldn't do before in Power Virtual Agent is set a variable before using the variable. Sounds odd, but you actually couldn't do that. And so that's another example of something that's added in the new designer.
So many cool things, eh?
Yeah, so I'm going to stop there. But and the other stuff like, if especially like an IVR or any type of situation, if I say press 1 for sales and 2 for customer service, and the person presses 3 or says the word 3, then it must loop back, but you might only want to loop back 3 times. And then if they haven't, responded correctly in 3 times, default to something else and then go somewhere. So that's also now in Power Virtual Agent. So you can say, okay, retry 3 times, that after the retry, 3 retries, give this message, and then go off this direction over here. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. There are some really cool things coming in. I think it's going to help with the adoption as well. Okay, so I think that is everything from my side that I wanted to cover in the news. Did anyone else pick up anything interesting that they maybe want to share?
Are there any changes to licensing?
Of course you would bring that up, David. Not that I've heard. I haven't seen anything specific yet. Okay,
well,
cool.
Functionality-wise, but there's been some logo updates on the Power Platform. So Power Platform itself got a new logo.
Yeah. Doesn't make much of a difference, though.
I like the logo for PowerFX.
Yeah.
That's quite cool.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. So with that, Karika, we're going to be handing over to you to take us through some of the things you're doing with AI Boulder.
Awesome. I don't know how I'm going to top that with all the news stuff. That's pretty rad. I'm like, ooh.
It's cool. Eh?
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. We'll start here. So hi everyone. I've actually been playing with something. I didn't make a presentation because I feel like talking through slides is pretty boring. But anyways, what made me do or build the solution was I had a conversation with a colleague at work, and I was quite shocked to find out how she was doing things manually, and I was like, no way, there's such an easier way to do this. So just to give some background, she was receiving some invoices in PDF format, but because she's working from home, so it sounds like when she was working at the office, she used to print out that, and then I don't know if she would scan it in or how she would do it, but at this point, she's manually writing down everything that's in the invoice. So just to give you an idea what the invoice looks like, is it's got about 40 something line items, right? So she literally writes down all of these by hand. Then she goes and types all of that manually into an Excel spreadsheet, adds the markup that needs to go in there, and then converts that Excel spreadsheet to a PDF just to send it to another client. So I was like, no ways, this can't be happening. So I told her, no, we have something that will make your life so much easier. So I took an evening and I built the solution, and I was so surprised. Like, I was thinking, you know, it's so quick to build. So that excuse of no, IT doesn't have time to build solutions for their own company, they're all just busy with clients, that completely flies out of the window. I'm guilty of that, so by the way. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of, I'm probably preaching to the converted, but I just want to show you something that was new to me that I just tried out, was when you selecting your fields that you want the document or the form processing model to recognize. Previously, I showed the one where you actually choose a table, but with this one, because it is an invoice with multiple pages, I saw this thing called multi-page table, and I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. I wonder how it's going to work. So I thought and it said that it's still in preview, so I thought, no, let me try it out. And it was working so nicely. I really enjoyed it. It's so easy to recognize the fields in the documents and just tag the proper ones. So let's go next.
Rick, I just want to check,
Sorry.
are you sharing your screen?
Yeah,
Am
your
I?
screen's not showing, no.
Oh, darn it. Yes, like, and I was doing the most amazing stuff, you guys. Really? Okay, so here
There
we
we
are.
go.
Please let me know
Yes,
where you
looks
can
good.
see my screen. That's probably what I should have started with. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, it's up, so you can carry on.
Okay, cool. Okay, so basically the steps that I've just skipped through is whether you're doing inserting structured or semi-structured documents, and you also can choose unstructured documents. So just to explain that is the structured documents is when you have you want to train your model on documents that has the same set, or it's almost like a template, and the fields that you want to extract are sitting at the same place more or less. Unstructured is when it's a completely different format every time, and you only want certain things extracted from that. So in this event, it's definitely a structured document that we want to get the information from. So I'm just going to go to where we actually had to start recognizing the data. Just waiting for it, because I just want to show you with the model how you can identify the multi-page tables, and that was quite neat for me. So I really enjoy doing that. So, you know, when you want to recognize something, you just click on it and you select which field to associate that one with. And then for the table, you actually like drag and highlight. And what was nice is you could say, continue to the next page. So you will notice that for every page, it recognized the fields that I want, and I could put it into my table, and the page has got its own columns. Let's go preview table. So we've got the description I wanted to take out there, the billing period, the unit price, and the quantity. So I didn't even use all the columns that's available in this document. I only picked out the ones that I wanted to use. And then what was also nice is when I started indicating the columns I want to use in the rows, there was this little, I don't know if you can see, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. There's this MS Azure plans, that's like this odd sentence over these columns. So I could actually choose so that it ignores this little piece here and it continue recognize. So you'll see that it actually misses that one. So I found that to be really simple and easy to use. It's something that I would like to show admin users more so that they can do this for themselves and really make their lives easier for themselves so they don't have to struggle with manual work. And then obviously the rest of it stays the same, the steps that you would do. So after you've tagged all your documents, you go and the model gets trained and you publish it so that you can use it in your flows. So I'm just going to go over to the flow and just walk through the steps a little bit, and then I'll just show you it in action. So something that I've recently played with, because I haven't played with Excel in Power Automate a lot, but recently I've had the requirement to do that more. So what I did was I actually built myself an Excel template. So excuse me for jumping a little bit. I'm just going to show you the template. So I built myself a template and I've got multiple tables on this in this spreadsheet. So I've got one table because on this spreadsheet, I want to populate the client field that I got from the invoice. And then this table here is the one where I actually get the information that I get from the invoice, and then I add the markup. So by the end of the flow, it populates all the data that it gets from that invoice, adds the markup, and then exports this Excel template to a PDF. So in the end, all the user needs to do is upload the invoice that they received, and that will start the workflow. And then afterwards, a PDF is generated for them, which has the markup already, and they can just send it. So if I go back, so the steps I have in here is to update the row in the add clients from the AI results. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for the column, which is client, and I'm looking for the value ID. So perhaps if anyone has a better way for me to do this, I haven't found a way to do this yet. So currently what I'm doing is in this template, if I want to rerun the flow, I would go and delete the rows that's been there already, but I just keep this one row for this description table. And for the client, I just replace whatever it put there as the client. I just return it back to ID. So when my flow runs again, it sees the ID value in this cell. And the same with this table. So I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, but I haven't figured that out quite yet. Cool. So then what I do is I just replace that key value ID with the client value that I get from the results from AI Builder. And then I'm doing an apply to each item that it got from that multi-page table, and it adds that row into the table. I've called the table name report data, and then it inserts the details that I want. So you'll notice I'll go to that columns just now in the template. I've actually hidden them. There's some columns that I have in there where I put the information in, and then I do the calculation with Excel formulas. Okay. So I just populate the details with the values that I'm getting from the AI Builder. And I add a row for every one of those items. And then I actually delete the ID row. So I put in everything below that, and then I just delete the ID row. I've put in a delay to write to finish because I've noticed, like, while it's inserting, sometimes it takes a bit long to insert all the details, even though it's past that step. So I found that when it converts the file to PDF, I've only got like 5 rows and there's meant to be like 40. So I just added a delay to allow all the writing that it needs to do to Excel, that it does that completely, and then it actually goes get the file, convert it to PDF, and then save the converted PDF file just in a folder in OneDrive. So what I'll do is I'll just test it with one of those invoices that I've shown you, and then it will run through, and then I'll just show you the output that it generates. But I must say it didn't take me long. I think it took me roughly about 5 hours to build this. And it will save, like the lady that was struggling with this, I think it took her about 2 weeks to complete something like this. So it's going to save her so
Wow.
much time. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be drastic savings then.
I know, like she's going to wonder what she's going to do with her time now. So the flow's running, and I'll get back to that successful one that's running now. But just to show you what the outcome looks like. Okay, let's download it. That's fine. And this is what the end result will look like. So it populates this client value, because that's where I've got that ID, the cell with the ID column. And these are all the rows that it got from the invoice. And it populates it with the correct data. It gets the billing periods from that file, and it generates in a PDF. So all she has to do is take this PDF and send it to the client.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, it's
That was
really
a lot
awesome.
of fun to build, I must say. Like, I really enjoyed building this, and I was once again amazed, like, what you can do with AI Builder and how it can simplify, especially people working in admin. You know, there's so many tasks that they do that's so mundane, and I understand that they don't know that there's these capabilities available to them, and it's like I've made it my motto to make them aware that there are tools out there that can really simplify your life. So I'm just waiting for this flow to work, just so that you can see that it does actually run. And I think what I should do, it should overwrite, because I think I chose to overwrite the file if it exists already, but I'll just see. Might break, might not. Fun times always when you demo live.
In the wrong hands, this could be very dangerous. Imagine if you just went to a boss and said that you could do a job for half of a salary.
Yeah, there we go.
I hear you. That would be so wrong, but I hear you. It is actually, it's crazy, and that's why I like the story that or the message that I always give with a demo like this, especially when I'm showing it to admin staff, because I know a lot of them are really like, it's legit a thing that they are scared of, is what if AI takes over their job? But the big thing is I'm trying to make them aware that don't think of it in that way. Think of the time you will have available for tasks that you generally don't get to, because these things are taking up so much of your time.
Yeah, and
No.
your job sort of evolves to maintain and manage these processes in the back end as well. 'Cause things
100%.
are going to change, things are going to improve, there's going to be different requirements. So it's a shift of a career more than losing a job.
100%. 100%. If we can get people to understand it in that way instead of fearing their job, because I think that's what's making people reluctant to adopt these technologies, because they really fear that they are gonna lose their jobs. Especially, I mean, we know COVID hit many people hard, but if a person can just make the people aware that this will really improve your productivity instead of take away from you, I think we will really make a big impact.
Yeah, and I think it's also always, if you have spare time, start doing your boss's job, so that if somebody gets fired, it's him.
Yes, that's the way to do it, Davis. So I'm just waiting for this flow to run. Okay, there we go. It's that delay one that took a while. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And like I said, if anyone has a suggestion for me, because what I did try was to kind of delete the template and recreate it, but then I got issues with the connectors because of the tables. Like when you use the same file, it's easy to select the table. And I know there's the get tables one, but I wasn't like getting the results I wanted. So, but I'm still playing around to refine it.
Oh, but this is great already as it is. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really
it's phenomenal.
a huge difference.
Would it work to maybe take that template and the first thing you do is to create a copy of it and then you action it on the copy?
That's what I actually tried. So you'll see here that I've got a template folder where I like took the copy and pasted it in here, because that's where I wanted to fetch it from. But that's when it like gave me a ID issue, or it can't find the table in the template or something like that. It was some weird issue.
It's a bit of a So it asks you for the file name, but what it's actually asking you is the file ID. And so when you then populate that value dynamically, you're supposed to pass it with the ID and not the name or the path.
Oh, I see.
It's similar in SharePoint, which is quite deceptive. It says
It
that,
is.
what's the file name, and then you give it the name, and it says, nope, you
That's
give
not
me the
what I
ID.
want.
Yeah, I want
Yes.
that. So if you hover over, or if you're going to show code for that action or peek,
Oh,
what's
is
it
it
called?
an edit mode?
Yeah, and if you then peek that action, you'll see the value that it's actually storing is the ID. And
Oh, I see.
yeah, so it's actually taking the ID, not the name.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'll have a look
No,
at
it
that a
doesn't
little
make
bit because
sense at all.
every time you recreate the file, it's gonna get a new ID.
Exactly. And it
Okay.
doesn't make any sense. What you did was 100% right. I don't know why they don't call that the file ID so that everybody knows what it's looking for.
I see.
So I think what's happening is on the front end, it's actually allowing you've got that little browse thingy, and then you go down and you select the file. So in the front end, it looks
Correct.
like the actual, but then in the back end, it's storing the ID.
Sneaky, sneaky. Okay, I'll see if I can find a workaround for that. But yeah, that's my demo in a nutshell.
Awesome, Karika. Thanks for sharing. That's
Awesome.
great.
Thanks,
It's
Chris.
awesome.
That's phenomenal.
It's always great to see what people are doing out there with the tool, and it's having a real impact. It's really nice to see. So thanks.
Definitely. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so the next topic was the collect or not to collect. David, I don't know if you want to kick this off.
No,
Sorry, guys.
Tian is actually kicking that off.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I just got to step away for a few minutes. My daughter is screaming on the other side of the house. I'll be back now. But carry on.
Alrighty, so I'm going to start off by sharing my screen so I don't forget that. Right, can everybody see my screen? Great.
Absolutely.
All right, so I just came up, had a conversation with a client, and they were asking me, so in Power Apps, you can collect your data in a collection, or you can use it directly from a data source. What would I recommend and why? And I kind of started wheel spinning there, because as a developer, I like to control when I can get or pull the data and how I do it. So I just created a little quick app here for us. So I can doing two things in different ways. So I can have my shopping list and I can pull all of that in a collection, and I can then use my collection to show things. I can create form elements here, and I can create a submit that will submit everything with a patch into my data source and then refresh the collection again. Or on the other hand, I can just use my select the right thing here. Okay. Anyway, I can. Oh, I'm missing it now. But anyway, I can just pull the data source, the data directly from the data source, and I can then use a form where I can just say my data source is a shopping list, and go ahead and kind of run it through there. But somehow I feel I don't have enough control over that. So I asked Davi if we can maybe have a chat in the community and what they would say to use a collection or to access your data directly. And now I'm going to shut up and just everybody else go for it, please.
Anyone?
I still like the idea of using a data source instead of collecting the information inside of the app.
Yeah, I think that collecting the data there should be a very good reason to do it, because what's happening in reality is it's caching that in the browser, and it feels like it should be fast, and it is. Sorry, Michael, you've got your hand up.
No, you were before me. You carry on.
So if it's small amounts of data of things that don't frequently change. So if you've got a list of branches that you know that you're going to be using in the app quite a lot, and there's 20 branches, and you just want it to be available so you don't have to do the transfer that traffic over the wire every time you get a list of branches, then it feels like that could work. And although with the efficiencies that's happening in the back end on the platform, it really shouldn't be much of an issue if you fetch the data directly from the data source. And I agree with Karika, is if you're using a proper data source, then it should be delegating that workload correctly to the data source so that the actual database or data source is doing the work and not the front end. I know in the beginning, in the beginning of Power Apps, there were many instances where in order to get around delegation issues, the way was just to suck everything into the front end. But with the data growing, and it becomes quite cumbersome, and you can really feel it on the front end if you do that. So my suggestion would be, if it's small data that you're going to have access frequently, then suck it into the front end. And then also, if you need to perform very complex queries on small sets of data, then it's fine to suck it into the front end, and you can perform those complex queries which might not be delegable. But as that should be a last resort, I would say always first, keep your data in the database and in the data source, and then interact with that data correctly. Michael, go for it.
Yeah, you see, I've got that typical cop-out answer, which
depends.
It depends. But certainly, I built that auditing application which allows you to audit, capture audits or fill in forms, but it needed to work offline. And so if you need to work offline, the model is you create collections, and then those collections essentially you save them and then write them back. And so if I built the app from day one to be built off collections, it would have been much easier for me to then make it an app that works offline. So that's why I'm like, it really helped me, because that's the way offline works in Canvas apps, is using collections. And then the other thing is, I guess it's, like for me, it's the old-fashioned web dev scenario, but you don't have to worry about it as much these days, which is essentially caching, right? So if you do have static data that is really not going to change, there's, I don't know, I still, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I would load that into a collection on application start and just use it forever there, than continually round-tripping to get it. Especially read-only, I don't know if it's metadata or branding data or configuration data. But I guess then it depends again, because then if you do need to refresh it, you have to figure that out. That's me.
Yeah, but you typically wouldn't be collecting that many records, surely. I mean, there is a limit of 2,000 records in a collection anyway, but you wouldn't be using that up to its max, because it's going to cause other problems, surely. No, David.
David, are you glowing, or are you?
Can you hear me?
That's David. Now
there you go. You're back.
I had a very good conversation with myself back there. I said all the right things, but essentially, Microsoft, the caching of local data is probably going to change in the not too distant future, where it's going to be built in more natively in the platform, where you don't have to do collections in order to do that. So there might actually be a time where they prevent you from loading data on app start. So there's going to be and that's part of why they've split it. They started splitting your onload events, so that they can restrict you from doing certain things on load, and clearing and saving data into the app is going to be one of those. So we're looking forward to that, where caching and working offline is going to be more native to the app. But yes, I hear you. In the meantime, that is the way that you work offline, and then there's no other way around it, to get around the collecting of the data.
David, so you mentioned if you're using smaller sets of data, and I don't know how this works in the back end, but I would think if you have a data set of 1,000 rows and you're only using 10 of them through a filter, wouldn't that filter be continuously running if you're using the data set the data source directly? Whereas you pull it into a collection, that filter happened once and it's sitting there, and it wouldn't have to redo that every time. I mean, I have no idea what happens in the back end. Just kind of logically for me, that would make sense.
Yeah, you're right. I think it depends on what kind of filter you're using, because if the filter is delegable, then typically that runs very fast on runtime. And I think that's the very important thing here is, if it's a delegable query, just hit the data source directly. So we've recently refactored an application that we inherited that was using local caching significant in pretty much everything that he did. And so we refactored it to use the data source, and it's probably, I don't know, 10, 15 times faster by just hitting the data source directly than first sucking everything into the app. So if you've got a large data source and you now only want a subset of that data, then it makes sense to, you could suck it into a collection. But in theory, I wouldn't even do that if there's no good reason for it. So if you're planning to use that through the app 30 times and you really have reason to believe that it's got some performance impacts on the application to transfer that data over the wire. If it's not that, then just keep it in the database.
Go ahead, Mike.
David once gave me some brilliant advice. Only once.
A very long time ago.
No, he often gives me very good advice. And I remember it was around, like if you take your gallery there, the way you set your data sources, you use the items property. And my question was, should I do my query and my definition of what should be in the data set directly in the expression on the items property, or should I do it somewhere else, let's say on screen load, and then just reference the variable on the items property? And David's answer was, do it on the items property, because if you ever need to debug this thing, you can go straight to the items property and you can see what's going on. Whereas when you start doing multiple steps, it gets complicated. And I think what you're also saying here, David, is when you use collections, you might not be getting the benefit that you think you are, and the downside is you're making your application more complex. And actually just go simple. Like the tech is so advanced these days that the performance hit that you're going to get by round tripping to the database is not what you think it is. And just by making it simpler is probably going to ultimately benefit the application performance and complexity anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good summation. The other question I do have though is, do you think it also depends on the data source? You know, like let's say Dataverse is super quick, but maybe if I'm, you know, connecting to some legacy mainframe, you know, it's just dog slow. You know, maybe then in that case, then you change, you do it differently. And maybe that's also where like this application monitor feature in Power Apps, where you can see how long steps take, and it tells you where your app's slow, and you go, okay, now, okay, it is slow there. Let's see, maybe we should use a collection instead. But rather don't default to collections, stay away from collections. I don't know. I rambled a bit there.
No, I think you've made some very good points, Michael. And I think one of the key things here is that in your example of doing the filter in the gallery versus in a screen on load or on visible, and then referencing that collection in the gallery, if you put it directly in gallery, you're giving the platform the opportunity to optimize how and when it retrieves that data. And I think there's a lot of things that's happening in the background that I'm definitely not smart enough to understand everything that Microsoft is doing in the back end to optimize the speed of getting the data from the various data sources. But if you go and do an on visible and suck everything into a collection, then you override and overrule all of those optimization effects, which sometimes it's a good thing, and that's exactly what you want to do because you want to be in control of that. But most of the times, when people think they're doing it for performance, it's actually having a negative effect on performance. There's a very good video from Reza Doriani on delegation on data sources, and there he explicitly shows you how if you suck it into a collection versus hitting the database directly, how it reduces performance to suck the collection into the app. I'll look for a link to that video and I'll post it in the chat quickly.
I guess maybe just to follow up on my comment about, does it also depend on the data source, which I think it can. But there's another aspect to performance, which is, I'll call it scalability. You know, there's a difference between one user using the app and 10,000 users using the app. And I guess it obviously depends on the app you're building, but let's just for argument's sake say that your app, you know, every user is going to open at 8 a.m. in the morning, and you've got 10,000 users of the app. And if you continue round tripping to the database, you're going to have quite a hit on that database, whatever system it is. And so sometimes it might not be about the app performance, but the impact of all this load on the database might have, because it might just not scale in that way, designed in that way, whatever it might be. And so therefore, actually, in that case, for 10,000 users, collections might be a good idea. Am I talking nonsense?
No, I think it's a very good point. There are also certain data sources that you have no choice but to suck it into a collection. Like if you hit an API or a custom connector that connects to a RESTful service somewhere, you can display that data directly in a collection, but typically you'll first suck that into a collection. Sorry, you can show directly in the items property of a gallery, but you'll most probably first put that in a collection so you can work with that data and then do paging and these sort of things, which is going to be very important for a REST API, which doesn't have all of the fancy footwork and all of the different layers between the front end and the back end that you do get with something like SharePoint or SQL. So it definitely depends on the data source. You're absolutely right, Michael.
Awesome.
So Tian, so what's the answer then?
No, I have no idea. That's why I asked the question.
The answer is it depends.
Yeah. It'd be nice to have a clear-cut answer, but yeah, the cop-outs, quick and easy, it depends on the situation.
I think one definite no is if you get using it to get around the 2000 record limit on the database or on Power Apps retrieving from the database. So if you're doing that, that's a definite no. That was necessary and that's what had to happen a very long time ago, but we definitely shouldn't be doing that anymore.
Yeah. But the collection can only handle 2000 records, can't it? Or is that the query that I'm remembering?
So that is the query and the collection. So if you're hitting a database or a data source and you're telling it to fetch all the data, it can only retrieve up to 2000 records.
Yeah.
Ever. So whether you do a filter or not, it'll only retrieve 2000 records.
And that's if you set the limit up. I think by default it's 800.
Yeah, something like
default, it's 100.
500.
500 or something like that.
Yeah, 500. Yeah.
So yes, that's if you're doing collections to try and get around that limit. So if you want to try and suck in 8,000 records, and you're now looping through a filter to incrementally fetch all the data, then that's probably going to come back and bite at some stage.
Yeah. So as it stands at the moment, if you are building an app for offline usage, then collections are all right to use, but otherwise, any other scenario, it's going to really depend on the situation, but not likely.
Yeah. I'll post this video from Reza. He actually does a great job at discussing alternatives, especially if your main data source on the application has a large amount of data. So he's got quite an interesting method that he uses to get around that, and it works quite well. We've used it quite often as well.
Okay.
Right. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the feedback.
Awesome. Thanks, Tian. Appreciate it. Okay, so next we've got the tech tip. David, you got something cool lined up for us?
Well, it depends. Let me share my screen, and after all that, I hope it's cool. Let me share this one. Okay, so I think I've touched on this in the past, where I just sort of mentioned it in one of the sessions. And there are probably more formal and better ways of doing release notes. So the moment you start doing ALM and all of these sort of wonderful things, and have all of your DevOps pipelines sorted out, then this is obviously less of an issue. But from what we're seeing is like 95% of the projects don't have those things in place. So this is a very easy stopgap to make sure that you do some proper release notes so that you actually know, first of all, what version of the app people are accessing. And because of the caching, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you're using caching in Power Apps, or not if you're using caching, if you're making a change in the app and you now just play that, you have to refresh the screen a few times before you get the new designs through. And that could be quite annoying if you're busy testing something and you didn't actually know if it's now using the latest design. And by using this method of your release notes or your version numbering, it could actually give you that information quite easily. All right, so what I'm going to show you is just in the app on start, you can go and just write a little formula to actually populate your release notes. And why that makes sense is that's obviously in this application. And if you see me shaking, it's because it's cold in my office, but it's not Power Apps at Buggy. But if you see the mouse moving around, but essentially it writes it into this design of the app. So whenever I launch this app, it's going to show me that release history. So the problem is if you store that in the release notes and stuff in SharePoint, and you open up an old version, then you're sort of getting it could be confusing. So this is a very easy way to get around that. So just going to write a small formula. So we say clear collect. Let's call this release notes. And now we're going to pass it some records. And in this, let's do version. And let's just say that's version 1. Let's start off with 1, most probably. And we're going to say date is today, and I'm just going to do this for text, or in text for now. What is the date today? Let's make it yesterday, because we probably want to add more than just 1. And now we're going to have a property for the updates. So, and there you're going to list all the changes that you've made. And this typically is an array. So we can go and say, we're going to have a version that says type, and this is an improvement. Or no, let's do a future. And the future is called, what are we going to call this? So description is make the app pretty. Okay, so just do format text over here, so it will make a little bit more sense. So then we've got updates, and there might be multiple updates. So we've got the feature over here to make the app pretty, but then in that same version, we might have also gone and fixed a bug, because sometimes that happens. So I'm going to say fix spelling mistake on there, right? Okay, so this is going to give us a property or a field called updates, and in there it's going to be an array of updates for this specific version. So what you could now do, so you can run this on start, and if Microsoft starts growling at you because you're populating collections and on start, you can probably put this in a timer on the first screen on the app to just load once. But what you can now do is you can now just insert a simple label somewhere in the app, and depending on your sort order, you can go and say, go and find the first item in the release notes and return the actual version of that. So there you'll see this is version 1. And if somebody now opens up this app, they'll automatically see somewhere small, unintrusively in a corner somewhere, that this is version 1 of the app. And it'll also make your troubleshooting life a lot easier. Because then you know for sure that you're not dealing with any caching issues. That if the client or the front end says this is version 1, then you know that it is version 1. So let's just rename this to say label release. Cool. So what you could do in any questions so far? So if you now want to do another version, you'll simply go and say copy that record. And you can decide on the sort order. I like to keep the latest one at the top. Just makes it easier to read. So let's say version 1.1, which is now today. We say we make it pass. And there were no bugs this time, so we can just remove that item over here. And the next time that you publish this app and now make it available to people, you'll see that's now version 1.1. All right, so that works pretty cool. What you could do in addition to this is just in the tooltip of this label, you could have a formula to actually, when you hover over this, to show you some of the latest changes. Or you can have on select. If you click on this label, then it takes you to another screen, and then it just shows you all of the fixes and all of the release notes, which is definitely an option as well. But what you could do is just in the tooltip, you can go and write a concat formula to actually just on hover over show you some of the latest changes. So you can go and say concat call these notes, and we want to say the date and colon. And now we want to actually, I suppose you probably want to do the version as well. So let's do version. It looks like, and then we start off in baby steps, because concat formulas can become quite scary. Okay, so there's two. Oh, I probably need to throw in a new line in there. So let's do that, and we do a short 10. It's a new line. Come on. It's not liking that.
It's trying to do something. It's broken it now.
Just that's better. So, okay. So let's try that. Okay, so there we've got two. We've got a date in version 1 and a date in version 1.1. So you,
interesting. It's not coming up. We can't see the pop-up on the screen share.
Okay. Let me do that. Let me share the whole screen. That'll fix that. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's going to give us, I'll probably change that around. Just feels better and more accurate, but okay, so that's the start. But then we can also go and say we want to now also do another concat. So we've got the version. How are we going to do that? So we probably need a, let me actually go and just go into this, copy that. Just from an existing app over here. All right, so that's going to concat the date and then the updates. So we're running another concat in this concat in order to get the actual descriptions of the changes. And then we're throwing a tab in front of them just to indent it a bit. So if we go and do that, it's going to show you the date and then all of the changes that happened as part of that date. So in this version, you'll just typically go and include the version. So will that be version and so that should do it. Okay, so that's the version and the date, and then all of the changes that you made as part of that. So that's a very quick way to just give the user some way of what's new in the app. And what's also very cool is you could, as part of this, when people launch the app, show them that this is a new version. So you can write some code on their first screen that says, if there's a new version, go and show them what's new. So then they just pops up on the screen and says version 1.1. This is new. These are the latest changes to watch out for. The only caveat to that is you then need somewhere in the data source that's persistent. You need to be able to say this user has last seen the what's new for this release, so that they open up the next time. It doesn't open up every time.
Keep popping up. Yeah.
Exactly, but that's actually a very nice and quick hit as well. Cool. Any questions? Cool. So
David, would it make a difference if you're storing this in a data source instead of creating the collection like you said?
so there's benefits to that. The only problem is if you're storing this in a data source, you still need to come into the app to somehow tell it which version this is, because
Okay.
otherwise it has no way for the app. So if you go and update your release note in the data source, all your apps in production that are looking at the same data source could potentially be, sucking in that same information.
Yeah.
Except if you have a data source per environment. So you'll have a version of that in production, and then you'll have a version of this in UAT and dev, and then you'll manipulate the data source to show this information. And you could do that. The only problem with that is that you might also want to run similar versions in the same environment at the same time. So you might want to say, well, I'm looking at.
Okay, yeah. So I see what you mean there. So you wouldn't be able to differentiate between them as easily as you are now.
Yes, exactly. So this forever stays in this version of the app. So if I ever copy this into another environment, or it doesn't matter,
Yeah,
this
part of it.
Exactly. So this is for always part of this design. It'll never change. It'll never accidentally be displayed by something else or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely other ways and maybe potentially better ways to do this, but this is a very quick way to give your users some sort of, well, and yourself, because who does this? I mean, who?
No, definitely not. But it can definitely be beneficial and save a lot of time and frustrations.
And I'm not a big fan of, let's save this, of these comments. So if you go and if I now save this and let's go and make a change and we put a button in there, and this version notes, I'm not a big fan of this, because in order to get access to this, you need to jump through a few hoops. And it's also the fact that I'm saving this doesn't necessarily mean that this is a version. I like to keep control of it through a more controlled method that I can say, I can sort of bundle all of these changes together and then say, yes, I'm now moving this design into UAT, and these are all of the fixes and all of the changes that are included in it.
Okay. That makes sense.
And you can also include where it's running. So if you have a app running in dev and in QA and prod, and you don't want to get confused, you can also just list that and show that on your app as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's a great point. I mean, you could. So typically for that, I would actually use a data source or environment variables, because then, yeah. So you could go and say, set a variable called var mode or runtime mode, and then you could go and say this is prod. Whatever. The only problem with this is that you need to then change the design of the app in order to now tell it it's in UAT, where if you use, typically for something like this, I'll use a SharePoint list or something somewhere that you link to the various environments. So each environment has its own SharePoint site with a SharePoint list or something for variables or parameters or whatever. And so when you move the app from dev to UAT, you set up the connection to the UAT SharePoint site, and then it knows that it's in UAT and not in production.
Yeah.
But this is an option if you want to go and change the design. Cool.
Awesome, David. Thanks for sharing. That's really cool.
Pleasure.
Definitely useful.
That's me.
Thanks, David. Yeah, Michael, go ahead. You're on mute, hey, Mike, if you are trying to talk. There we go.
Yeah, no, I'm slow. It just took me a long time.
Okay.
That was really cool. Thanks, David. Just on a slightly different note, I forgot to mention earlier on the creator kit for Power Apps that's in preview, which looks amazing. I haven't looked at it in any detail, but I wondered, has anyone looked at it or played with it?
Not from my side.
I have played with it, and it's very cool.
Hello, Roma.
What does
Hi,
it do?
David. How are you?
Well, and you?
Good, thanks. Sorry, Michael, I lost you.
What does it do?
Do you want to actually see it now?
If you could show it, that would be great. No
Or if
pressure.
you want to do a full session on it next month, we'll definitely be. You can give us a sneak peek now and then do a session on it next month if you want.
Okay, cool. So just a sneak peek would be, what I've seen is everybody complains that the UI is not pretty, or they are like putting extra time for updating the UI. So what the team does, the PowerCat team has introduced Creator Kit. It's a solution, and this is going to be just sneak peek, and I'm going to close. By the time it's updating, it has 3 apps that gives you the flexibility to include. So similar to a PCF component, this is also a component that resides within your environment, and then you can reference the things that are inside it. Let's say progress bar or the site menu navigation, you can always reference it. The mandatory or the prerequisite step is, let's say this is my dev environment and I've used it. Then this solution would become a prerequisite for rest of your environments so that you can utilize it. There's a cool theme designer that also gives you accessibility features if you are someone. Oops, sign out. So yeah, it is actually cool. Let me just click in the link to show that. It keeps asking me. I think my computer needs a restart. But anyway, yeah, so let me just put this way. So this is one of the app that comes with it, the Fluent Theme Designer. And let's say you have a color palette in mind, and then you can decide and play with your primary colors, text color, and the background color. So if you notice, as I'm changing, it's the color will change. An update, let's say purple. The text color can vary again. I want to make it white, and then the primary color want to be black because the buttons are gonna play with it. So you have noticed the UI is pretty bad, and it's also telling you on the accessibility checker that your color palette has got 2 issues. The cool thing is once you have like fixed it and you're good to go, you can test how it's gonna look on your actual app. You click it, there's different options, and then you can export the theme directly without having too much know about
That is
your
cool.
apps. Yeah. And you
That
just
is
copy
cool.
paste the code on your app start. So yeah,
Wow.
that's it. The sneak peek.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Roma.
Roma.
Yeah, I did post a link to it in the chat window, so go grab it and check it out if you want to play around with it. Nice spot, Michael. Oh, that looks cool. Perfect. So with that, I think that brings us to the end. We've got an open discussion. So is there anything that anyone wants to raise or chat about before we drop off? David, are we going to look at doing in-person sessions again?
Yeah, for sure. Who'll be interested?
I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been spending a lot more time in the office lately, and it's great to see people in person again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be warmer than my office at the home, so looking forward to it.
That's always a good thing, right? Okay, awesome. Well, everyone, thanks for that. Thanks for the time tonight. Thanks for joining. I hope you got to learn something new, some exciting things coming, and then we'll see you all next month. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a fantastic day further.
Bye.
Chat soon. Cheers all.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.